Personal record, classification, historical archive. Author, Zix Thala of the Third Hegemony Date, Galactic Standard 2387.4. The greatest mistake we ever made was underestimating them. When the humans first emerged from their primitive solar system in their crude fusion drives, the Galactic Council barely registered their existence. We Zephyrians had ruled the Outer Rim for 3 millennia. Our plasma technology could glass entire worlds. Our shields could withstand supernovas, and our strategic minds had conquered 17 species without significant loss. The humans? They arrived in ships held together with what they called duct tape and prayer. Admiral Kethvor laughed when he received the first human diplomatic transmission. They wished to establish trade routes, he had wheezed through his respiratory slits. These mammals who still use chemical propulsion want to negotiate with us. But there was something in that transmission that should have warned us. The human ambassador, a small female with graying hair, had smiled. Not the submissive grimace of a conquered species, but something else entirely, something that made my scales prickle with unease. "We come in peace," she had said, "but we're prepared for any alternative you might prefer." The war began 3 cycles later. Our first mistake was assuming their primitive technology made them weak. When our battlecruiser Death Song engaged their lead vessel, a converted cargo hauler they'd laughably named Indomitable, we expected swift victory. Our plasma cannons could have evaporated their ship in seconds, but the humans didn't fight like any species we'd encountered. Where others retreated, they advanced. Where logic dictated surrender, they adapted. The Indomitable shouldn't have survived our first volley, but somehow it did, cobbled together with spare parts and what their engineer called spite. Captain Torres, we learned later, had ordered his crew to literally rebuild their ship around them while under fire. When their main engines failed, they rigged a cargo bay full of fusion bombs as makeshift propulsion. When their weapons overheated, they vented their water reserves to cool them and continued fighting while dehydrated. The Death Song limped home that day, its crew traumatized by an encounter with beings who treated certain death as merely another engineering problem to solve. Our second mistake was believing we could break their spirit through overwhelming force. We assembled the 9th Fleet, 300 vessels of destruction that had pacified the Corvan rebellion in mere hours. Surely these humans would see reason when faced with such power. Instead, they did something unprecedented in galactic warfare. They asked for volunteers. Within days, every human ship in known space converged on our position. Merchants, explorers, even civilian transports. All armed with whatever weapons they could mount and crewed by volunteers who'd never seen combat. Their fleet was a chaotic mess of mismatched vessels that violated every principle of military doctrine. It destroyed us completely. They fought like their homeworld, unpredictable and impossibly resilient. When conventional tactics failed, they invented new ones mid-battle. When outnumbered, they split into smaller groups that struck like scavenger packs. When outgunned, they used our own weapons against us by ramming damaged ships into our formations and detonating their reactors. But the truly terrifying moment came when Commander Sarah Chen, piloting a fighter held together with welding foam and determination, crashed directly into my command ship's bridge. She survived the impact somehow, and when security forces surrounded her, she simply sat in the wreckage and began eating what the humans call a sandwich. "Nice ship," she said between bites, blood streaming from a head wound. "Mind if I borrow it?" That's when I realized we weren't fighting a military. We were fighting an entire species that had apparently decided the laws of physics were more like suggestions. Our third and final mistake was trying to match their adaptability. We began retrofitting our ships with redundant systems, training our crews in improvisation, attempting to replicate their chaotic efficiency. But we were trying to become something we fundamentally weren't. Humans, we discovered, didn't just adapt to survive. They thrived on impossibility. Every challenge made them more determined, every loss more creative. When we destroyed their manufacturing worlds, they built factories in asteroid belts. When we cut their supply lines, they learned to synthesize fuel from cosmic radiation and stubbornness. The final battle took place above Earth itself. We had assembled every remaining ship in the hegemony, a fleet so vast it blocked out the sun. Surely now, facing extinction, they would surrender. Instead, they invited us down for negotiations. The human representative was an elderly man named Peterson who served us something called coffee and spoke about weather patterns while our invasion fleet darkened his sky. He was completely inexplicably calm. "You know," he said, stirring his drink, "my grandfather fought in something called World War II. Terrible business, but he used to say that humans don't fight wars to win them. We fight them to end them." That's when their real fleet arrived. Ships emerged from behind every planet, every moon, every piece of space debris in the system, not the desperate collection of volunteers we'd faced before, but a coordinated armada that had been building quietly for decades. They'd been preparing for this moment since first contact, turning their entire species into a single, unified war machine, but they didn't attack. Instead, every human ship simultaneously broadcast the same message: "We surrender." In that moment of confusion, they struck everywhere at once, not just our fleet, but every hegemony installation across the galaxy. While we'd focused on Earth, they'd been infiltrating our supply lines, our communication networks, our very civilization. They won the war by surrendering to us. Now I sit in comfortable captivity on New Geneva, writing this account for the historical record. The humans treat their prisoners well, better than we ever treated our own citizens. They've given me access to their libraries, their culture, their impossible stories of a species that looks at the universe and asks not, "Can we survive this?" but "How can we make this more interesting?" They didn't conquer us through superior firepower or advanced technology. They conquered us by being more human than we ever understood was possible. And despite everything, I find myself grateful for the surrender. End personal record filed in Galactic Archives, subsection, How Not to Fight Humans.